My parents gave my college fund to my stepbrother for his music career. 10 years later, I became a doctor. When they showed up asking me for help with medical bills, I handed them his demo CD. Hey Reddit, buckle up for this one. It's a decade in the making, and the payoff is absolutely beautiful. I'm 32 now, female, a family medicine physician with my own practice in Portland. But rewind 10 years, and I was just an 18-year-old whose entire future got derailed by parents who decided musical theater was more important than medical school. Here's how it all went down. My mom married my stepdad, Gary, when I was 12. He came with a son, Trevor, who was 15 at the time. From day one, Trevor became the golden child of the household. He was this wannabe Broadway star who spent every waking moment singing show tunes and practicing jazz hands in the mirror. I'll admit, he had decent pipes. But the kid had the work ethic of a sloth and the ego of Kanye West. Gary, meanwhile, was one of those divorced dads trying way too hard to be the cool parent. He constantly bragged about Trevor's talent and how he was going to be the next big thing on Broadway. Every single conversation somehow circled back to Trevor's latest audition or performance. Meanwhile, I was pulling straight A's in AP chemistry and biology, volunteering at the hospital, and mapping out my entire path to medical school. The favoritism in the house was so obvious it was almost comical. When I got accepted into the National Honor Society, Gary's response, "That's nice, honey." Did you hear Trevor got the lead in the school musical? When I scored in the 95th percentile on my PSATs, Mom clapped politely, then immediately switched gears to talk about how Trevor needed new headshots for his portfolio. And Trevor? He milked the attention for all it was worth. The kid would literally break into song during dinner conversations. No joke. We'd be discussing grocery lists, and suddenly he'd start belting Defying Gravity from Wicked like we were his personal Broadway audience. Gary would beam with pride while I sat there wondering if I was having a stroke. The double standards were endless. My science fair projects? Very nice, dear. Trevor's community theater performances? Full family attendance, flowers, and a celebratory dinner afterward. I once won first place at the Regional Science Olympiad. Gary's only comment? Asking if we could leave early because Trevor had rehearsal. One story sums up the dynamic perfectly. Junior year, I spent months on a research project about antibiotic resistance in local water sources. I worked weekends at the university lab, did actual field work, and presented findings impressive enough for my AP bio teacher to nominate me for the state-level competition. That week, I found out I'd won second place at state, a huge accomplishment for my college applications. That exact same week, Trevor auditioned for the lead in the community theater's Guys and Dolls. He didn't get the part. He just got a callback. Guess which achievement dominated family dinner conversation for the next month? Gary even printed out Trevor's callback notice and stuck it on the fridge. My state science award, stuffed into a drawer somewhere. But I figured college would be my escape. I had been saving every dollar from my part-time job at the drugstore, 3 shifts after school plus 8-hour weekend shifts. The job was mind-numbing, stocking shelves, running the register, dealing with customers who couldn't understand why their insurance wouldn't cover their pet's medication. But every paycheck went straight into my college savings account. And most importantly, my mom had always promised my college fund would cover the rest. This wasn't some vague promise. It was a real account started by my biological father before he died in a car accident when I was 8. Dad had been an engineer, practical and forward-thinking, and he'd set up that education fund with conservative investments. By senior year, it had grown to about $85,000. Not Harvard med school money, maybe, but more than enough to get me through undergrad debt-free and build a foundation for med school. I had my entire timeline mapped out. 4 years at Oregon State for pre-med, keep my GPA high, crush the MCAT, get into Oregon Health and Science University, finish residency, and finally, Dr. Sarah Mitchell. Where I screwed up was assuming that because the money was set aside by my late father specifically for my education, it was actually mine. The bomb dropped spring of senior year, right in the middle of college decision season. I'd been researching med schools, comparing pre-med programs, and preparing to accept my spot at Oregon State. I'd already been accepted to several schools, but Oregon State was the best balance of academic reputation and in-state tuition. One evening, I was in my room studying for AP Calc finals when Mom knocked on my door using that fake sweet voice she always used when bad news was coming. The same tone she'd used when she told me we couldn't afford the senior class trip to DC or that I wasn't getting a car for my 16th birthday. "Honey, we need to talk about college." I thought she wanted to discuss dorm assignments, meal plans, maybe class scheduling. Boy, was I wrong. Your stepfather and I have been talking, and we've decided to redirect your college fund toward Trevor's career development. I stared at her like she had started speaking ancient Greek. Redirect? Well, Trevor got accepted to that intensive summer program at Juilliard. And then there's the year-long acting conservatory in New York. This is his shot, Sarah, his one opportunity to really make it in the industry. The words hit like a punch to the gut. I felt nauseous. That's my college fund. Dad left that money for my education. Mom's face went tight and defensive, the expression she always wore when she knew she was being unreasonable, but refused to back down. Gary is your father now, and we make decisions as a family. Trevor's dreams are just as valid as yours. Trevor's dreams. I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to save lives. He wants to prance around in tights singing show tunes. Don't be so dramatic. There will be other opportunities for you to go to college. Trevor's window is closing. He needs to strike while the iron is hot. Strike while the iron is hot. About a 20-year-old who had never held a real job, never paid for anything himself, and whose biggest accomplishment was being chorus member number 3 in Oklahoma. You can take out student loans like everyone else, Gary chimed in from the doorway, apparently eavesdropping. It's a character-building experience. Trevor's artistic development can't wait. Character building. Right. Because working 3 jobs to pay for med school while Trevor played around in Manhattan was exactly what my father had in mind when he created that fund. I argued every angle I could. The money came from my father, not Gary. I had real career prospects, real earning potential. Trevor was chasing a pipe dream in an industry where 90% of actors are unemployed at any given time. Med school was expensive and competitive. Without that fund, my chances dropped significantly. Nothing worked. Gary had Mom convinced that Trevor was the family's best investment. Their ticket to fame and fortune. One successful Broadway show and he'll be set for life, Gary kept saying. Meanwhile, doctors are a dime a dozen. Doctors are a dime a dozen. This from a man who managed a Jiffy Lube franchise and thought getting an oil change every 3,000 miles was peak automotive wisdom. The conversation went in circles for 2 hours. Gary ranted about return on investment. Mom insisted families sacrifice for each other and accused me of being selfish. I kept pointing out that it was theft, money designated for my education being stolen for Trevor's fantasy. And then Gary dropped the bomb. The decision's already been made. We've spoken to the financial advisor and begun the transfer process. Trevor's program starts in June, so we needed to act quickly. They hadn't consulted me. They hadn't asked for input. They had already started moving my father's money, my money, to fund Trevor's dream before even bothering to tell me. Writing? The worst part was watching Trevor's reaction when they told him. The kid didn't even have the decency to feel guilty. He just started researching New York apartments and talking about how he'd thank the family in his Tony Award acceptance speech. Don't worry, Sarah, he said with this patronizing little smile that made me want to throw something at his head. When I make it big, I'll help pay for your medical school. Think of this as an investment in both our futures. An investment in his Broadway dreams. Using my dead father's money, I locked myself in my room for the rest of the day, swinging between rage and despair. Everything I had worked for, every plan I'd made, every sacrifice I'd endured depended on that college fund. Without it, medical school became exponentially more difficult, maybe even impossible. That summer was brutal in ways I hadn't imagined. While Trevor was living it up at his Juilliard program, posting Instagram stories from trendy Manhattan cafes and networking events, I was grinding through double shifts at the drugstore and applying for every scholarship, grant, and loan I could possibly find. The financial aid office at Oregon State became my second home. Mrs. Patterson, my guidance counselor, quietly furious though she tried to stay professional, helped me navigate the endless maze of applications and requirements. There are options, she told me during one of our meetings, spreading scholarship forms, loan paperwork, and work-study descriptions across her desk. Merit scholarships, need-based aid, work-study programs, student loans. It won't be easy, but it's doable. What she didn't say, but we both knew, was that it would be a hell of a lot harder than it needed to be. Students with family support could focus on academics and extracurriculars. Students like me would be working 30 hours a week just to survive. In the end, I pieced together a financial aid package that covered about 60% of my costs. Academic scholarships paid part of tuition. Need-based aid helped with room and board. But there was still a huge gap. The rest came from working nights at a 24-hour diner near campus, the Sunrise. Cafe, where I served coffee and pie to drunk college kids and night shift. Workers from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. 3 nights a week. My freshman year schedule looked like something designed by a sadist. Classes during the day, study time in the afternoon, diner shifts overnight, 4 hours of sleep, then repeat. I lived on vending machine coffee and whatever free food I could scrounge from the diner. Day-old muffins, soup about to be thrown out, the occasional sandwich slipped to me by a sympathetic cook. Meanwhile, Trevor was still posting Instagram updates from New York, talking about his artistic journey and networking with other aspiring performers. The $85,000 that should have been securing my education was instead funding his coffee shop meetings, acting classes, and what looked like a pretty active social life. My grades slipped that first year. Not disastrously, I managed a 3. 4 GPA, but it wasn't the 3.8 I'd planned on. It's hard to excel academically when you're running on 4 hours of sleep and your biggest meal of the day is a granola bar between classes. But I adapted. I found study groups that met during my awake hours. I built relationships with professors during office hours while other students were out socializing. I discovered something surprising. Medical school admissions committees actually looked favorably on applicants who had worked their way through college. It showed grit and work ethic trust fund kids couldn't fake. Meanwhile, Trevor's updates from New York became less frequent and more vague. The Juilliard summer program had gone fine, but the year-long conservatory was apparently tougher than he expected. His Instagram shifted from artistic revelations to complaints about the competitive theater scene, the insane cost of living, and how impossible it was to get noticed. Gary made excuses during our rare family phone calls. He's finding his artistic voice. The New York scene is tough to break into. He just needs more time. What Trevor really needed was a job, but that was beneath him. The few times I spoke to him directly, he whined about auditions that went nowhere, expensive classes that weren't delivering results, and the general difficulty of making it as an artist in New York. By sophomore year, I'd found my rhythm. Better time management brought my GPA up to a 3.7. The diner was still exhausting, but I'd been promoted to shift supervisor, slightly better pay, more predictable hours. I also started tutoring organic chemistry, which not only paid more than food service, but looked great on my med school applications. Trevor, meanwhile, had moved out of his pricey Manhattan place into a shared apartment in Brooklyn. His social media posts grew fewer and farther between, and when he did post, it was mostly about the struggle of being an artist rather than any actual accomplishments. Junior year brought both highs and lows. I began volunteering at the campus health center, finally getting hands-on experience with patient care. The volunteer coordinator, Dr. Martinez, became an informal mentor, guiding me through the med school application process and even writing me a recommendation letter. But that same year, the bomb dropped. Trevor was moving back home. The New York experiment had officially failed, 3 years gone, and most of my college fund burned up in the process. He was 23, broke, and moving back into his childhood bedroom like nothing had happened. Gary tried to spin it as regrouping for the next phase and bringing valuable industry experience back to the local market. In reality, Trevor had wasted $85,000 of my inheritance and had nothing to show for it but stories about auditions he didn't book and connections that never led anywhere. Holiday gatherings became unbearable. Trevor would regale everyone with stories of his time in New York, name-dropping actors and directors he'd met briefly at networking events. Meanwhile, I was grinding through 16-hour days of classes, work, volunteering, and MCAT prep. But still, family conversations revolved around Trevor's Big Apple tales. Senior year was crunch time. MCAT prep, medical school applications, maintaining grades, and still working enough hours to cover basic living expenses. I took the MCAT twice. The first score was decent but not great. The second, after months of studying with borrowed prep books and free online resources, was much stronger. Medical school interviews were torture in their own right. Professional clothes I couldn't afford, travel expenses that wrecked my grocery budget, the stress of competing against kids whose parents had paid for prep courses and admissions consultants. But somehow it worked. I was accepted into Oregon Health and Science University, my dream school. Excellent reputation, relatively affordable for in-state students. Not a full scholarship, but manageable with loans and part-time work. 4 years later, I graduated from Oregon State summa cum laude with a 3.9 GPA in biochemistry. Not bad for someone who'd worked 25, 30 hours a week through college and lived off vending machine dinners and diner leftovers. Medical school was even harder without family support. While others could focus entirely on studies, I worked weekends in urgent care clinics as a scribe, tutored organic chemistry undergrads, and did medical research for faculty, paid graduate student rates to analyze data. The loans were terrifying. Each semester meant new promissory notes, new totals, new calculations of how many decades it would take to dig myself out. By graduation, I owed about $250,000. Manageable for a doctor's salary, sure, but still a mountain of debt. Throughout med school, I kept tabs on Trevor through social media and family gossip. He'd landed a job at a music store in town, occasionally performed in local community theater, and still lived at home with Mom and Gary. Still talking about his career, like he was just temporarily between big breaks. The contrast was stark. I was learning how to diagnose heart attacks and deliver babies, working 80-hour weeks on clinical rotations, preparing to actually save lives. Trevor was selling guitar picks and auditioning for dinner theater productions of Grease. I graduated medical school with honors and started my residency in family medicine at Portland General. 3 years of brutal schedules, overnight shifts, ER rotations, learning to handle everything from routine checkups to life-threatening emergencies. But I loved it. Every difficult case, every complicated diagnosis, every patient I helped, it all felt worth it. Writing during residency, the updates from home kept getting more worrying. Trevor had lost his job at the music store and was now working part-time at Guitar Center. He was still living at home, still chasing his dreams, but closing in on 30 with no real career, no life skills, nothing to show for all that time. Meanwhile, Gary's health was slipping. Too much stress, a terrible diet, and what looked like undiagnosed heart problems he stubbornly ignored. Mom was picking up hours at a dental office, but it wasn't nearly enough to support 3 adults, especially when Trevor contributed almost nothing to the household. By the time I finished residency, I had finally opened my own practice in family medicine in a nice suburb of Portland. Slowly, I was building a patient base and for the first time as an adult earning real money. It was everything I'd hoped for, helping families, treating kids and the elderly, being the kind of doctor who actually listens and takes time. My student loans were finally manageable on a doctor's salary. I'd rented a small house with a garden, bought a reliable car, and started imagining what it felt like to build a life instead of just clawing my way to the next exam or loan payment. Trevor, meanwhile, was 31, still in his childhood bedroom, still working retail, and still posting on Facebook about projects that never went anywhere. Then the call came. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon, and I was in my office reviewing patient charts when Mom phoned, hysterical. Gary had been having chest pains for weeks, but brushed them off because, in his words, he didn't have time to be sick. Classic. That morning, he collapsed at Jiffy Lube during his shift and was rushed to the hospital. A heart attack, a big one, according to the ER doctor who called Mom. He needed surgery. Multiple bypasses. They were keeping him in intensive care for at least a week. My training kicked in automatically. I asked about his symptoms, the timeline, what the cardiologists were saying, the prognosis, treatment plan. My brain was already running through recovery time, complications, the kind of follow-up care he'd need. Then I asked the question I dreaded. How much is this going to cost? I already knew. Gary's health insurance through Jiffy Lube was basically catastrophic coverage. High deductible, tiny network. Fine for checkups, useless for a major surgery. They were staring at something like $200,000 in bills if nothing went wrong during recovery. The plan might cover 40% after the deductible, maybe. Mom was panicking in that specific way people do when they've never faced real financial catastrophe before. They had no savings. Most of Gary's income had gone into Trevor's career development. The house was under a reverse mortgage Gary had taken out a few years back for some failed business expansion. They were, in plain words, screwed. "We don't know what to do," Mom said, her voice breaking. Then softly, "We thought maybe since you're a doctor now." There it was. The ask I'd known was coming. "You want me to help with the medical bills?" I said. "It's not like we expect you to pay everything," she said quickly, hearing how that sounded. "But maybe you could talk to the doctors, figure out payment plans, charity care, something." She wanted me to work out payment plans, with the money I'd scraped together through years of sleepless nights, grinding through med school while they'd spent my inheritance funding Trevor's Manhattan adventure. I'll think about it, I said. The most non-committal thing I could manage. That night, sitting in the first place I'd ever had the money to decorate properly, I let myself think it through. Part of me wanted to help. Gary wasn't evil, just a father who had made terrible choices in the name of supporting his son. Mom wasn't malicious, just weak, letting herself believe Trevor's dreams mattered more than my future. But every time guilt started creeping in, I remembered the nights in a 24-hour diner, serving drunk college kids coffee at 2 a.m., while trying to memorize anatomy because I couldn't afford to just study like my classmates with parental support. I remembered ramen 3 nights a week because textbooks and lab fees ate my budget. The endless stress of loans, scholarship essays, hustling through jobs, while Trevor posted Instagram stories from Manhattan restaurants I couldn't afford to look at, let alone eat in. The next morning, I drove to my childhood home for the first time in 3 years. From the outside, nothing had changed, except Trevor's car in the driveway. A decent Honda Accord, probably worth more than my entire food budget for med school. The lawn needed mowing, the paint was peeling, but it was still the same middle-class house I'd grown up in. Trevor answered the door, groggy even though it was nearly 11 a.m. He had the same entitled look on his face, though it flickered when he saw me. "Oh, hey Sarah, Mom's at the hospital with Gary." "I know. I came to see you." He let me in. The living room was frozen in time. Same furniture, same family photos. But I noticed something. Plenty of framed pictures of Trevor on stage through the years, not one of my academic milestones. "This is really scary," Trevor said, settling on the couch like it was time for a long chat. "Gary's really sick and the money situation is totally screwed." "Yeah, I heard. What are you doing to help?" He looked honestly confused.
What do you mean?
"I mean, what are you doing to help with the medical bills? You're 31. You live here rent-free. They've supported your career for over a decade. What's your plan?" Trevor shifted, uncomfortable. "I mean, I'm working at Guitar Center. I don't exactly have medical bill money lying around, right? You could get a second job. Or a better job. Something that actually uses that expensive training they paid for. It's not that simple. I'm still pursuing my music career. I can't just abandon everything I've worked for." Everything he'd worked for with my college fund. "Trevor, what happened to the $85,000?
What do you mean?
My college fund. The $85,000 Dad left me for school. Where did it go?" He squirmed. "That was years ago, Sarah. It went to my training, living expenses in New York, networking, investment in my future. And what return did they get on that investment?" Silence. He picked at a loose thread on the couch cushion, refusing to meet my eyes. "Look," he said finally, "I know you're still mad about the college thing, but it worked out. You're a doctor now. You made it work. I made it work by racking up $250,000 in student loans and working 3 jobs through med school. You made it work by burning through Dad's money on acting classes and New York rent. That's not fair. Mom and Gary made that decision. I didn't force them. No, but you didn't stop them either. And you sure didn't offer to pay it back when Broadway didn't call." Trevor stood pacing toward the window like people do when they're cornered by reality. "What do you want me to say, Sarah?" "I'm sorry." "Fine, I'm sorry. But I can't change the past. And Gary's sick now. This is bigger than old family drama." "You're right. This is bigger than old family drama. This is about accountability." I reached into my purse and pulled out a CD. Not a cheap burned CD with a Sharpie label. This was professionally manufactured, glossy artwork and all. Trevor's eyes went wide the second he saw it. "Where did you get that?" "Your MySpace page. From 2018, remember? You blew about $3,000 of my college fund getting these demo CDs made. You posted about it nonstop, swore it was going to be your breakthrough. That record labels would hear your talent and come calling." Trevor's face flushed red. That was a different phase of my career. I'm more focused on live performance now." "Right. Well, I bought this copy off eBay. Figured it was the least I could do since I technically helped pay for it." I set the CD down on the coffee table between us and headed for the door. "Sarah, wait. What are you doing? Are you going to help with Gary's bills or not?" At the door, I turned back to look at him. This 31-year-old man still living in his childhood bedroom, who'd burned through my inheritance chasing a failed dream, and was now asking me to bail out the family that had sacrificed my future for his. I'm going to help exactly as much as this family helped me get through medical school. His brow furrowed. "What does that mean?" It means you should probably start checking couch cushions for spare change. Maybe sell a few of those professional headshots from your portfolio. That evening, Mom called again. Gary's surgery went well, but he'll be in the hospital at least another week. The bills are already stacking up, and the full treatment estimate is $180,000, not even counting follow-up care and rehab. Did you talk to Trevor? I did. Interesting conversation. He's still living the dream, apparently. Sarah, please. I know you're angry about the college fund situation, but this is life or death. Gary could die if he doesn't get proper follow-up care. Mom, Gary will get proper care. That's how hospitals work here. They don't let heart surgery patients die because of billing disputes. But the debt, it'll destroy us. We'll lose the house. We don't know what to do. I took a slow breath, trying to balance honesty with restraint. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to talk to the hospital's financial counselor about payment plans. Every hospital has them. You're going to apply for charity care. Most places have sliding scale programs for people who can't afford treatment. And Trevor is going to get a second job, or maybe his first real job, so you can focus on medical bills. But Trevor's career is part-time retail and the occasional community theater gig. He's 31. It's time to be realistic about his prospects and his responsibilities to this family. You could just help us. You're a doctor. You make good money now. There it was. The entitlement that had defined my entire childhood, the belief that my success was communal property, while Trevor's failures were just temporary setbacks requiring more investment. You're right, I do make good money. Because I worked my ass off through medical school without family support. Because I spent 4 years living on ramen, working nights while my classmates went to study groups paid for by their parents. Because I graduated with $400,000 in debt that I'm still paying off. We did what we thought was best at the time. No, you did what was convenient for your new husband and his son. You sacrificed my future to fund Trevor's fantasy, and now you expect me to clean up the fallout. It wasn't a fantasy. Trevor is talented. Mom, Trevor is a 31-year-old man living in his childhood bedroom, working part-time at Guitar Center, and his biggest achievement in 10 years is a demo CD no record label ever touched. Meanwhile, I'm actually saving lives, contributing to society in meaningful ways. Which one of us turned out to be the better investment? Silence, then. So, you won't help? I'm not giving you money, if that's what you're asking. But I'll give you something better. The same thing you gave me when I needed support for my education. Advice to figure it out on your own. And good luck making it work. That's cruel. No, Mom. Cruel is taking a teenager's college fund, the money her deceased father left specifically for her education, and giving it to your stepson for acting classes. What I'm doing is justice. I hung up and blocked their numbers. The months that followed were surprisingly peaceful. I threw myself into my growing medical practice. Word spread quickly about the new family doctor who actually listened, who spent real time with patients. I began specializing in preventive care and chronic disease management, finding real fulfillment in helping people stay healthy instead of just treating emergencies. 2 weeks later, my cousin Jessica called. She'd heard the family gossip about Gary and my refusal to help, and wanted my side. Because honestly, what I'm hearing from your mom doesn't sound like the Sarah I know, she said gently. I told her everything. The stolen college fund, Trevor's failed career bankrolled by my inheritance, the years of favoritism and dismissive treatment, and their latest expectation that I would swoop in to save them from their own choices. Jessica was quiet. Then, Jesus, Sarah. I had no idea about the college fund. That's incredibly messed up. Yeah, well, water under the bridge now. Is it, though? How do you feel about how this is playing out? I paused, considering. Honestly, I'm at peace with it. I spent years being furious about what they did, but building my career, proving I could make it without their support, that's been healing. Now they need help, and they're learning what it feels like when family doesn't come through for something important. But what about Gary? He might actually need long-term care. Gary's not going to die, Jessica. They'll figure out payment plans, maybe qualify for charity programs. Hospitals have entire departments to help people manage this, but they'll have to do it themselves. Maybe they'll finally learn what it's like to struggle for something important, the way I did for 8 years. Jessica got it. She'd seen the family dynamics at holidays, seen how differently Trevor and I were treated. But until now, she hadn't realized just how deep it went. Writing. A month later, I heard through the family network that Gary had been discharged and was recovering well at home. They'd qualified for the hospital's charity care program, which covered about 60% of the costs. The rest had been set up on a 10-year payment plan with reduced interest. More importantly, Trevor had gotten a second job working nights at a call center. He still lived at home, but for the first time in his adult life, he was contributing to household expenses. Apparently, the financial crisis had been the wake-up call he needed about the realistic prospects of his music career. Mom had gone back to work full-time as a dental receptionist, her first full-time job in years. They were managing, but barely, with no extra money for Trevor's artistic pursuits or professional development. 6 months after Gary's surgery, Trevor reached out to me directly. Not through Mom, not through family gossip, a text from his own phone. "Hey Sarah, I know things have been weird between us, but I wanted to reach out. Gary's recovery is going really well, and I've been thinking a lot about what you said about accountability and responsibility. I got a better job, assistant manager at a music store downtown. Not just retail sales. Still doing music stuff on weekends, but treating it more like a hobby now instead of expecting it to pay the bills. Anyway, I wanted to say I'm sorry about the college fund thing. I was young and selfish, and I didn't really think about how it affected your life. I know this doesn't fix anything, but I wanted you to know that I understand now what you went through. It was the first genuine apology I'd ever gotten from him. Not perfect, not complete, but honest and specific, unlike the non-apologies I'd grown used to from my family." I texted back, "Thanks for saying that, Trevor. I'm glad Gary's doing better and that you're taking more responsibility. That means a lot." That was it. No dramatic reconciliation, no family dinners, no big reunion. Just a kind of peace that felt more valuable than forced forgiveness. Another 6 months passed. My practice continued growing. I'd hired a nurse practitioner to help with the patient load, and I'd finally paid off my undergraduate student loans. I still had the medical school debt, but it was manageable now, steadily shrinking. One late evening at the office, catching up on patient files and insurance paperwork, my phone rang. An unknown local number. "Dr. Mitchell, this is Gary." His voice sounded different, softer, quieter, more hesitant than I remembered. "Hi, Gary, how are you feeling?" "Much better. The cardiologist says I'm ahead of schedule on recovery. Listen, I was wondering if I could take you to coffee sometime. There are some things I'd like to say, and I don't think I can do them justice over the phone." We met the following Saturday at a coffee shop near my office. Gary looked older, more tired than I remembered, but healthier than I expected after major surgery. "I owe you an apology," he began immediately. "Several, actually." I waited, curious. The college fund thing was wrong. Not misguided. Not poorly thought out. Wrong. I convinced your mother it was the right decision for the family, but it wasn't. That money was meant for your education, specifically set aside by your father. We had no right to touch it. Why did you do it? Gary stirred his coffee slowly, clearly thinking. Honestly, because I was desperate to prove that supporting Trevor's dreams was the right choice. I'd been divorced. I felt like I'd failed as a father the first time around, and I wanted to show Trevor I believed in him completely. But I did it at your expense, and that was inexcusable. What about Trevor? Have you talked to him about all this? Yes, several times. The financial crisis was a wake-up call. He's been contributing to the household, found better work, started acting like the adult he should have been years ago. I'm proud of the progress he's making. I nodded. Sarah, I need you to know, your mother never stopped feeling guilty about the college fund. She talks about it all the time now, how proud she is of you, how much she regrets listening to me. She just never said it to you directly. Pride, I think. Or fear you'd reject the apology. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This is a promissory note. We can't pay you back the $85,000 all at once, but we've worked out a budget to repay you over 10 years, with interest. It's not enough and it's not soon enough, but it's what we can realistically manage. I unfolded it. It was detailed with monthly payment amounts, interest calculations, and contingencies if their financial situation changed. The interest rate was even higher than it needed to be. You don't have to do this, Gary. Yes, we do. We stole your inheritance and used it to fund a fantasy. Now we're going to pay it back, even if it takes until we're dead to do it. I folded the paper and slipped it into my purse. Gary, I want you to know I'm not angry anymore. I was for a long time. But building my career, proving I could succeed without support, that healed something in me. I'm actually grateful for the struggle in some ways. It made me stronger. more self-reliant. That doesn't make what you did right. No, but it makes you who you are today. And I like who I am. We finished our coffee talking about lighter things, his recovery, my practice, the weather. Two adults finally finding a way to coexist with respect. And if you're hooked on this story, hit that hype button. It tells YouTube, this video deserves to blow up.